Hi guys. I know if y'all have been watching my other videos, you're probably getting tired of hearing me say this, but not everybody that watches this video will have seen the others. So we are in Q Bible. We're in Q Bible because it has the Strong's reference numbers right there in the text. And this time we're going to be looking at 2 Samuel chapter 22. We're in the King James Version. And we see here in verse 1, it says, "And David spake." So this is David speaking. We are going to move down to verse 35 because that's the verse that I'm interested in. And it says, "He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms." Okay, the word I want to look at here is steel. It is Strong's 5154. So let's go over to the Blue Letter Bible. We see we have Strong's H5154, and we see that the King James Version translates this in the following manner: brass 7 times and steel 3 times. Okay, first of all, let's move down to the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, and let's look at the definition of this Hebrew word. It says, feminine of the preceding neuter, made of brass, hence brass. We have the reference of Leviticus 26:19, Job 41:19, and Isaiah 45:2. Then we have brazen gates in Job 40:18, and brazen channels in Job 28:2. Well, I'm somewhat confused. Now I think it's brazen channels in Job 40:18, and then Job 28:2 is the stone is molten into brass. Okay, now what we don't have here is a reference to the specific verse of 2 Samuel 22:35, which is usually what I show you when I'm using evidence from the lexicon, because as I've said many times, when the scripture verses are referenced, that means that they have been verified. But we don't have that in this case. But what we don't see in this definition is the word steel anywhere. So Mr. Tregelles, who translated the Gesenius Hebrew Lexicon, either failed to mention that steel was a legitimate definition of this word, or when he was doing his work, the word steel did not appear in the King James Version. So first of all, let's look at the other 3 times that the word was translated as steel. So I'm going back to Samuel 32:35. There's our word. We're going to click on that. And Q Bible tells us we have the Authorized Version, brass translated 7 times, steel 3 times, and as I discussed in previous video, Authorized Version is the King James Version. So we see steel, it's translated as steel now in our present day in the verse we just looked at, and in Psalms 18:34, which actually, if you read Psalms 18:34, is basically quoting what was written in Samuel 22:35. However, Job 20:24 is it's not a quote, so it's the other time it's mentioned. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, here we have King James Bible. We're looking at Job 20. Let's go down to verse 24. And it says, "He shall flee from the iron weapon, and the bow of steel shall strike him through." So, okay, let's look at some more evidence. First of all, let's look at the history of steel. Now, here is this entry here is from Wikipedia, and it says the Chinese of the Warring States period of 403 to 221 BC had quench-hardened steel, while Chinese of the Han Dynasty of 202 BC to 220 AD created steel by melting together wrought iron and cast iron gaining an ultimate product of carbon immediate steel by the 1st century AD. Okay, I haven't found another reference that dates steel as having known to exist prior to this entry right here. So 403 BC is our first known historical reference to having steel. So let's go here, and I have done a Google search of the time period of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And I hope everybody can see this. I hope it's big enough. Here in this entry, I'm not going to click on it and go to the web page because what we want to know is right here in the description. It says the events of 1st and 2nd Samuel took place in the archaeological periods known as the Iron Ages 1 and 2, 1200 to 800 BC. As the name implies, iron began to play a strategic role in society during this time. The Canaanites had used iron in weaponry for centuries prior to the days of Israel's Harmonica. Okay, well, not steel, because 1200 to 800 BC, well, 800 BC is roughly 400 years prior to 404 BC, when we have our first historical reference to steel. And people say, okay, they'll just argue, well, you know, it was translated as steel, but what it really was iron. Well, why didn't they translate it as iron? And if that's the case, why didn't the Hebrew definition of the word include iron as part of the definition? Okay. So now let's, Job, we know that Job was our other entry where we have the bow of steel. So now let's do a Google search for the time period of Job, and we'll go with our first entry here, and it says Job lived after Joseph but before Moses, after 1650 BC and before 1500 BC. Okay, folks, that's a long time, even before when Samuel was written, and well over 1,000 years before we have our first historical reference of steel being used. So let's review. Job 20:24. It says, he shall flee from the iron weapon, and from the bow of steel shall strike him through. Okay, folks, this is absolutely absurd to think that they had steel back 1500 BC. It's I don't know what else to say. It's absurd. So I'm saying that the original King James, when it was translated, it would have been translated as brass or maybe even bronze. I have a friend of mine who adamantly states that he has read this verse and he remembers brass. But I mean, this is not about testimony, this is about evidence. So the evidence shows us from the Cassini's Hebrew Lexicon, which, you know, if you guys have watched my video on that, you know that it's an authoritative source. If steel had been an actual definition of this Hebrew word, it would appear in this dictionary, but it doesn't. So again, I think we have some very strong evidence here that while the King James Version now shows this Hebrew word translated as steel 3 times, it's pretty absurd to think that back prior to 1500 BC when Job was written that they had steel, or for that matter, probably not even iron. Of course, I'm not a historian, so I don't know for sure. But anyway, I believe this is some very compelling evidence that we have another Bible change, that originally it was brass or maybe bronze, and has been changed to steel. Okay guys, that's it for this video. I'll see you guys later.